History forgot her on purpose. She wasn't just a queen, she was a master of war, a political genius, and a fearless voice against slavery. This is the untold story of Queen Nzinga, Africa's warrior queen who faced the Portuguese Empire and refused to bow. Welcome to the Baobab Within, where ancestral wisdom and Africa's hidden history come alive. Subscribe and join the journey of rediscovering truth, power, and purpose. Nzinga was born in 1583 in the heart of Central Africa into the royal family of the Ndongo Kingdom, what is today Angola. Her father, Angola Kilawanji Kia Samba, was a wise and formidable king, respected not only by his people, but feared by the encroaching Portuguese. At this time, the Portuguese were tightening their grip on African coastal regions, seeking slaves, gold, and control. Resistance was dangerous, but it was growing, and Queen Nzinga was raised in the middle of it. From a young age, she showed signs of brilliance. She trained alongside the royal army, learning archery, horseback riding, and even tactics of ambush and defense. But it wasn't just the sword she mastered. She also became fluent in diplomacy, languages, and negotiation. Her name, Nzinga Umbande, comes from the Kimbundu word for to twist, as she was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. In her culture, this was a spiritual sign, meaning the child was destined for greatness, perhaps even royalty. By the early 1600s, the Portuguese had built forts along the coast and were sending missionaries inland, not just to preach, but to dominate. They demanded tribute in slaves and meddled in the politics of African kingdoms, using bribery and division to weaken rulers. Nzinga's brother, King Umbande, struggled under these pressures. His rule was marked by instability, famine, and rising unrest. But he knew one thing: Nzinga was the only one who could face the Portuguese at their level. In 1622, he sent her to Luanda to negotiate with the Portuguese governor. And here comes one of the most iconic scenes in African diplomatic history. When Nzinga arrived, the Portuguese offered her no chair, symbolically treating her as inferior. But Nzinga didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly motioned for one of her assistants to kneel and sat on his back, eye to eye with the governor. It wasn't just dramatic, it was a message. I am your equal. I will not kneel to empire. That day, Nzinga negotiated the end of hostilities and a peace agreement that included the recognition of her brother as king and the withdrawal of Portuguese troops. It was a major diplomatic victory, but it would not last. Not long after, her brother died, some say by suicide, others say through assassination. Nzinga, now one of the most experienced and respected figures in the court, seized the throne. But it wasn't smooth. Her claim was contested by male rivals and even members of her own family. Many believed that as a woman, she could not rule alone. Nzinga answered with action. She mobilized her loyal warriors, executed traitors, and began to restructure the kingdom. She refused to pay tribute to Portugal. She abolished the slave trade in her territories. She welcomed escaped enslaved people into her court and gave them sanctuary. She forged an alliance with the Dutch, who were also enemies of the Portuguese, and began launching guerrilla attacks, using the forests and rivers of Angola as her battlefield. For over 30 years, she fought colonial invasion. Her tactics were bold: surprise ambushes, feigned retreats, night raids, use of decoys, and misinformation. The Portuguese feared her, They called her the she-wolf. Her people called her mother. Nzinga knew that to truly defeat the Portuguese, she needed to expand. So she moved her capital to the kingdom of Matamba, a more fertile and secure region east of Ndongo. There, she built a new state, one that would rival Portuguese colonies in both economy and power. She created a standing army that included both men and women, promoted military excellence, and built trade routes with inland African kingdoms. Nzinga also knew how to play religion as a strategy. She had been baptized during her earlier negotiations with the Portuguese and took the Christian name Ana de Souza. But she never let the cross erase her culture. In Matamba, she allowed Christian missions, but also kept African spiritual practices alive, honoring her ancestors and gods through secret ceremonies and sacred rites. She was both queen and priestess, both politician and warrior. She was Africa's answer to empire. Nzinga ruled for over 40 years, a feat few monarchs anywhere in the world can claim. She died in 1663 at the age of 80, still ruling, still strategizing, still resisting. Even after her death, the Portuguese were unable to conquer her territory for decades. She had not just fought them, she had outlasted them. Today, Queen Nzinga is honored across Africa. In Angola, her statue stands tall in the capital city, Luanda, a symbol of national pride and female leadership. She is remembered as a feminist icon, a liberation figure, and one of the most effective African rulers in history. But still, many history books ignore her because her story challenges the narrative. It says Africans were not always passive victims, that women were not always in the background, that power, strategy, and resistance have always been part of the African legacy. So, what do we take from Queen Nzinga today? We learn that leadership is not about gender, it's about courage. That culture is not a costume, it's our root system. And that no matter the empire, we still hold the power to resist, to build, and to rise. Nzinga's fire still burns in our blood. Like, share, and subscribe to help keep her story alive. Next in this series, Samori Touré, the lion who fought French colonizers to the very end. Until then, stay rooted, stay rising. This is the Baobab Within.